Hello.
How are you?
I'm okay. I have a minor technical difficulty, but
Okay.
I'm good. How are you?
Oh, I'm fine. Uh, I hope you solve the technical difficulty.
No problem. It's a very minor one. Uh, I cannot connect my earpods to my
Uh,
phone, so it may be a little bit noisy, but I'm going to go to somewhere quiet so it's a
that's
bit
good.
better.
Yeah, it's the usual technical difficulty,
Oh,
connecting
yeah.
stuff.
Hold this button to connect. And no. Anyway.
I mean, what was wrong with cables? It was so convenient.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
definitely.
yeah, all of this technology. So, welcome everyone to our weekly Twitter space. And today we're going to talk about a lot of important things regarding censorship resistance, privacy, and what was happening during this week. We will also share some news and updates about Beam. We were supposed to have a special guest with us tonight. Unfortunately, he fell a little bit under the weather and could not join, which is not surprising because things we're going to talk about would make like everyone sick to their stomach. So yeah, but we hope we will try to bring him on next time and get his opinion. But in the meantime, what we're going to talk about today is basically like three kind of major topics. First of which is the upcoming Ethereum merge and what it means for censorship resistance of the Ethereum network. There was a lot of interesting news and debates happening this week. And then we're going to also talk about what's happening with the ZK, let's say, technology and how it is applied today on Ethereum. Uh, and finally, we're going to talk about Beam. There were several questions from the community about, how Beam is prepared to handle all of the situations that kind of happened recently. And we will also share some interesting updates and news. So let's get started. Yeah. Okay. So let's start with the upcoming Ethereum merge. So as you know, last week we talked about what happened with the Tornado Cash, and in fact, that it was kind of added to the sanctions list, and it was the first time that the contract, the smart contract address, was added to this list, and not an organization or an individual. And of course, this in it of itself kind of created several interesting new questions. Um, but we also saw the kind of response from the community and from the other organizations. GitHub immediately deleted the code and blocked the accounts of developers and the project itself. Infura and Alchemy and the other centralized RPC providers for Ethereum started blocking these addresses. And a lot of major protocols such as Uniswap and several others also block the access to these addresses. So the response was very, very quick. Like it all happened in the span of a few days. And one of the things that immediately kind of started being discussed is what it will mean for the post-merge Ethereum, which will be proof of stake. And several people actually raised some very valid points. The most kind of, I would say, central of which is the fact that in this kind of post-merge ecosystem, at least in the current state, about 67%, which is, as we know, the majority that is required to take over the proof of stake network, is actually controlled by about 11 relatively large organizations, so-called staking pools. And most of these pools are regulated, belong to regulated organizations, and fall under United States jurisdiction. And immediately the question was, what will happen with these organizations in the context of this OFAC list that prohibits access to certain addresses? Are they going to censor it, or like what's going to happen? And one of the things that was like really important in this debate is the fact that the whole process of how Ethereum proof of stake is going to work, who is going to build the blocks, and how the voting on these blocks, like in terms of the validators, is going to work. It's supposed to follow this kind of schema that there is a separation between whoever builds the block and whoever proposes it. The validator, which gets the slot, the next slot, and it's called the proposer. And in an ideal world, the current kind of let's say, architecture that was proposed and described is that the validators are supposed to vote only on block header. So you have a block producer, builder, building the block, and then only sending the header to some kind of a marketplace, which in this case, like for example, is MEV Boost. And the MEV Boost automatically selects the most profitable header for the block proposer to propose, to sign on. And it's all very good and fine. However, if this validator is a regulated entity, I'm not sure it can actually sign on a block for which the entire transaction set is not known, right? It would be very strange. And what it means in practice is that all of these bodies, like especially large organizations, will kind of have to be their own block builders, and then they will build the blocks and they will also sign the blocks while they know which transactions are included, so that they don't break the law or kind of interfere with these regulations. And it could have been avoided technically, or at least kind of made different, if this process of separation between the builder of the block and the proposer would have been implemented in the Ethereum kind of mechanism, but it wasn't. And until now, this entire kind of story of the fork was very, strange. There was a lot of delays. It's been going on for several years, but now it's a few weeks away. It suddenly became a reality, and people started trying to understand, okay, after all this time, what was actually built and how it's supposed to work. And in the light of these new kind of behaviors that you can now add the smart contract to the sanctions list, suddenly, all of these questions pop up like in an instant. And a lot of discussions were had on Twitter and probably a lot of other places. So the official Ethereum community, or not official, but the Ethereum community is currently saying several things. First of all of these validator pools said that they're not going to censor transactions, and they promise not to do that or something of the sort, which is very nice, but obviously it's not something that can be completely trusted, in my opinion. A lot of people started proposing all kinds of solutions, but the reality remains that we are currently in a very strange situation because you cannot really run an Ethereum node. I'm not sure it will be a lot simpler to do post-merge, but definitely not possible today. All of the major players in this staking pools ecosystem are regulated entities. All of the access to these smart contracts that are running on the network are done either through centralized fronts that can be censored or through RPC providers such as Infura or Alchemy, which are also centralized. And it's kind of like this very weird situation where this network is like decentralized in theory, but the access to it from all sides is basically centralized, right?
Yeah. And this has been like one of the very eye-opening aspects recently is how quick to kind of jump on the censorship train many of these companies have been.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It was very, very fast. There was no discussion. There was no kind of, DAOs voting on stuff. It's just bang, 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 and, the access is gone.
Yeah.
Now, previously, there were some, obviously, limitations. There were some addresses that were blocked. But first of all of these addresses belong to either individuals or organizations, basically custodial addresses that, had control of these funds. Never before was it applied to a smart contract, which is kind of locked and self-managed. And also, it was kind of always at least in the public's mind, in the PR kind of aspect, it was always like, oh, it's just the front end. It's just the front end that it's limited. It's just the front end. You can always access, the smart contract in other ways, even though it's not like really a simple thing to do, but at least theoretically it's a possibility. Now, today we're talking about something much more like complicated and much more important, and it's the fact that not only will you not be able to access it through the front ends or official front ends, or even through official RPC providers. And just to remind you, MetaMask is using, I think, Infura to even access this information, so you can censor the transactions there. But the very layer of consensus of the network will be kind of always checking against those sanction lists, and will basically just discard all the transactions that are trying to break, go through to these addresses that were blocked. Yeah, it's very strange situation, and so yeah, it's kind of happening very quickly. Even though it should have been probably, like I would imagine, it should have been discussed much earlier in the design or decision-making stage of this transition. But now everybody has this strange feeling, at least I have this feeling that, the train is rolling, right? We're getting closer to the date of the merge. And most of centralized organizations like USDC, Circle, and several others, the Chainlink oracles, they said they're going to support this fork, and they're only going to be working on the new proof of stake Ethereum. But it kind of gets this feeling that this censorship element was kind of left behind and not completely discussed, or at least properly considered. And it makes a lot of people, including myself, uneasy, because it's happening, and it's not clear how this property of the network is going to work.
Absolutely. And we kind of speed ran from like theory into like practical application of what's going to happen and how we're going to handle it. And many people, I have kind of two thoughts about this. Many people kind of folded over and are like censoring stuff before they even need to think about it, in my opinion. But I was speaking with a friend that's been heavily involved in Ethereum since early 2015 or something, and he was saying it kind of makes sense. It's not surprising that regulators have come down hard on Tornado Cash, and also that these other protocols are not like kind of mortars or advocates for such a thing. They're more just building protocol and opening it to users and this kind of stuff. And I kind of agreed with his point when he said that. Like it makes sense to, at least in my opinion, it makes sense to keep yourself safe and this kind of thing, and out of trouble.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And
this is exactly like this chilling effect, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of, like, for example, in some cases, protocols censor things that they were not even kind of maybe directly required to, but just to be safe, we don't want any trouble.
Yeah.
And this is exactly the point, because so we have, we saw that recently some of the Aztec transactions, or at least people who used Aztec, were requested by, I think it was FTX, that requested kind of additional clarification regarding those transactions.
Yeah.
And like I think that what's going to happen is that they will try to stay away from anything private just to be on the safe side.
Yeah. And this is a huge shame as well. Like, and it's always kind of been a talking point in crypto. Like, if you're not doing anything wrong, you don't need privacy, especially with like the two biggest coins, Bitcoin and Ethereum, being fully transparent in terms of like data on chain and transactions and addresses and this kind of stuff. But this is a very like dangerous kind of avenue to travel down, that privacy is only for criminals and privacy is only for people doing stuff that's not okay by whatever entity that says what is okay or not. It's a very kind of, it's a very dangerous and slippery slide, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. And also now, like it's not just about privacy. It's like privacy is like one thing, but even if you kind of are transparent, still you have now this I don't know what to call it, kind of implicit permission to start
Mm.
thinking about like, wait a second, do we like this? What about this smart contract? Do we like it? Do we like it?
Yeah,
What
yeah,
does it do? Can you do something bad with it? Oh, you might. Okay, let's block it, right? That's sanction.
yeah. And then bad becomes very like, I mean, bad is always very like subjective, and then it becomes a thing of like, is making a profit bad, is doing this bad, is donating to this cause bad, is receiving money from this individual bad.
Yes.
It's a very strange, it for me at least, it's a very strange concept that I think should not really fit into the crypto model, and yet this is what we're seeing now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really don't like the fact that the Ethereum community, at least like the, let's say, more kind of official part of it, or like more, not, the critics, but rather the proponents of it, are not doing a good enough job of addressing these issues, in my opinion, seriously enough. Because I have read a lot of kind of points on both like pro and against, and I have to admit that right now the critics of this specific point are making much more kind of serious effort and like bringing like, in my opinion, better arguments than people who are defending the merge like as it is, right, without any changes. Um,
Absolutely. Many of the like Ethereum supporters are almost just saying like it's okay, and that's their argument, is that it's going to be okay, and blah 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 blah,
yeah, it's gonna be fine.
without, yeah, without addressing kind of the issues that are very very like pertinent with the merge coming up.
I totally agree. I mean, in any other situations, like Coinbase or whomever saying, "Oh, we promise not to censor transactions," it would have been laughed at, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
But suddenly it becomes kind of a valid point. Oh, they promised.
yeah, yeah.
Already two major stake pools already promised. Okay, what about the rest? No, not what about the rest. What about these ones?
But this brings me to like a question that I have, or rather maybe a talking point that's kind of more relevant to the difference between proof of stake and proof of work, uh, and I kind of go back to one of the instances. I think it was last year, and a US based mining pool that set up, they were censoring transactions on their pool to be OFAC or other kind of parameters compliant, and it didn't last very long. Like they kind of gave up, and because, at least this is my thinking, because giving up on certain blocks made it less profitable for them as a mining pool, they had to kind of give up on the OFAC compliance. Uh, and I guess the question or talking point here is, what's the like biggest difference between proof of work and proof of stake that kind of creates this more kind of corruptible, censorship enabled environment that isn't so present in proof of work? And also, I guess the follow up point or the follow up question is how, or which aspects of what's happening now with regards to the merge are relevant to sort of Bitcoin and proof of work networks in the future?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and it's really the important kind of important thing to discuss because there are several differences, and uh, some of these differences are in the implementation. Like, let me give you an example. When you are a proof of work miner, you usually own the equipment that you're mining on, if they're ASICs or GPUs. And for you to switch to another pool when you are the owner of these ASICs or GPUs or whatever you are using to mine is basically just kind of changing one line in your script, right? You connect to a different pool. And obviously, you're going to connect to a pool which gives you the most profitability, and it's obviously going to be a pool which censors as little transactions as possible for many reasons, like starting from transaction fees and general block fees. Now, uh, even like today, I think even the basic analysis shows that a lot of transactions in the block like can be somehow related to these sanction addresses. Um, so it may result in omitting quite a large amount of blocks, which definitely affects your profitability. However, in the staking pool situation, and once again, I'm quoting here a little bit from that video that we shared, I think last week, maybe we should share it this week again. If it's not implemented correctly, you have a lot more stickiness. If you are actually staking your funds in a non-custodial, like in custodial fashion, right? You actually like sending your funds to somebody else to stake, and you are not in direct control of these funds. There are several problems with that. First of all, changing to another staking pool is not as an easy process and might take much longer, might be related to kind of some loss in terms of like the fees that you're paying or like the process of getting your funds out of one staking pool and putting in the next one. And this friction is important because it makes kind of this switch process more difficult, right? Also, if you know that like all of the top staking pools are actually censoring transactions, then your economic incentive is not as large because it's not like you're choosing between somebody who is censoring and somebody who is not. So it becomes kind of much more closer in terms of like, why would you switch if everybody's doing that?
Yeah.
And it's an important kind of difference in terms of like who owns the power, right? Obviously, it also gives more freedom to the staking pools themselves, especially if the 60-something% of the staking power is controlled by, I don't know, 4, 5, 6, 7 large organizations. It makes this completely a different game. And it's different between like when you have like 3 or 4 mining pools, because once again, switching a pool is easy. And each pool knows that the moment they're doing something wrong, people will just switch to another pool and they will just disappear, which is not so with the staking pools in the proof of stake. So this is kind of the first, and you could have implemented it in a way that you are non-custodial, that each of the every one of the stakers has complete and total control of their funds, and switching between pools is easy. But that's not how it is today.
Yeah, and there was I'm not sure if it was mentioned already, but there was kind of the idea of like the block signers signing the block without having knowledge of exactly what transactions are in the block, only knowing that they kind of conform to the like consensus rules.
Yeah.
And this would pretty much kind of, how to say, like make the, at least for now, make the kind of block the people publishing the blocks and this kind of thing void of any responsibility, as they don't know if there's a sanctioned kind of transaction or if there's anything that would be pulled up in the block. But this isn't the case, and they already, before signing the block, they can kind of see and evaluate what transactions are in the block. Is this right?
Yeah. So that was supposed to be the mechanism that would ensure that there is a separation between whoever is actually building the block and whoever is signing it, right?
Yeah.
But since this mechanism was not implemented on the protocol level so far, from what I understand, it basically means that there is no, there isn't anything that would kind of prohibit the same entity from building and signing their own blocks.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
this is what they will probably do if they want to be compliant. Now, another point about the proof of stake is that in proof of work, if you are doing something, whether it's censoring or whether it's kind of MEV or whatever, there is still this probabilistic aspect. Even if you are one of like few large pools, you still have a probability, even though it might be a relatively large one, of closing the next block. But in proof of stake, the validator for the next slot is known beforehand.
Mm. Yeah.
And this means that uh, there is kind of a certainty of who is going to sign the next block and then, or the next slot, and then it's kind of obvious, like what you're going to do, right? In both in terms of MEV and both in terms of the censorship. And it slightly changes this, this relation of power between kind of how mining pools operate and how staking pools operate, right? So there's no kind of open question here. Yeah, you know who is going to close the next block, and that's about it.
Yeah, exactly. And this somewhat or substantially increases like the responsibility on the block signer as well.
Yeah. By the way, one of the arguments that was widely discussed on Twitter about this is that if somebody is going to censor transactions, we will slash them, we will punish them, and we will slash them. And it's like social slashing, like social consensus. This is what's supposed to fight this censorship problem. But there are kind of two problems with that. First of all, there is no such mechanism today. Like you're only slashed for missing your slots or signing double blocks. Like if you're signing two different blocks, or if you're completely kind of missing your slot, that's when you're actually slashed. And the second
Yeah.
problem is that it's very difficult for the minority, like in this case, if you are like under the 30 something percent, to really influence the game because it's difficult to make decisions. For example, let's say we start rolling like it is, and this is, by the way, one of my like most important concerns here. And then we say something like, we will add this PBS mechanism later, right?
Yeah.
But how exactly is it going to work? Like, how are you going to force this on a majority of regulator validators, right? Every fork that you're going to kind of try to make to propose this new mechanism is kind of doomed if you don't control the majority of the voting power.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, for like at least how I understand like regulators and like governments and their power and how they wield it and this kind of stuff. I mean, it wouldn't be beyond them to kind of clamp down on anyone signaling like for such a protocol or such a protocol upgrade to go through. I mean, like if you signaled or said yes to such an upgrade, then you could be kind of liable for uh,
Exactly.
yeah, yeah.
So they would say something like, listen, like we're making a ton of money here as it is. It's all good. Like, why do we even need to add all of these kind of censorship resistant properties? Like it works just as well for us. Now, just like in the proof of work mining, like you have, when you're doing any kind of meaningful upgrade, you need to convince the miners that it's good for them. It means that the network gets better, you will get more traction, more transactions, and hence more fees for the miners. And this is the reason why miners support the fork, right? In general, this is the process, or at least this is how it's supposed to work.
Yeah.
But in this case, it's a little bit different because the network is already very popular, the profits are huge. And like, why rock the boat? Like, what do we have to gain from giving more, freedom, less censorship, or more privacy to our users? Like, what? That's exactly the problem here, right?
Yeah, it would almost like dilute or diffuse the profits that were already there into more hands or more validators and this kind of stuff.
Yeah. So, so another topic that, in my opinion, is very important and interesting is what will happen with the ZK technologies, right? So, Aztec is obviously a ZK-based privacy protocol, but we have a lot of interesting and upcoming and existing protocols that use, for example, ZK rollups. And we have a lot of like several different protocols and companies that develop ZK EVM, which is the next generation of kind of generic ZK rollups. And both of these solutions are very important for the scalability of Ethereum on layer two. And we saw a lot of progress in this area like recently.
Yeah.
And it's great. But at the same time, ZK also provides like some additional privacy. And in some cases, it was kind of described as, oh, like you see, we don't need dedicated privacy solutions on Ethereum because ZK rolls will take care of that too. Now, this is like exactly the problem because now what's going to happen is that somebody is building these proofs, right? Some centralized entity is building these proofs. And at the same time, this entity is also responsible for including or not including specific transactions into that proof. Now, in general, there is a mechanism that, for example, you take the mempool, and then, for example, if certain transaction is consistently not included in several blocks, you can create a mechanism where you come to the creator of the zero knowledge proofs and you say, wait a minute, why didn't you include this transaction? Let's punish you. You stake something and we will punish you for that because you need to include all transactions that arrive to the mempool. However, like in this new kind of climate, it will be very difficult to do so because once again, it's based on the mechanism design. If you design the mechanism in a way that makes it difficult not to include all transactions and makes it difficult and unprofitable to censor transactions, then that's what will happen. Like your incentive model is built in a way to be inclusive, to be free and private. However, if you are building the system that you don't have to do that, and that's what's going to happen. So these entities which are creating these proofs, and by the way, it's quite a demanding process, so it's not something that anyone will be able to do on their laptop. You need like machines with a lot of computing power to create those proofs. That's exactly what will happen. They will just, once again, be either compliant or do something like that will exclude certain transactions. And I'm not sure how this is going to work. Like if it's not part of the protocol.
Yeah, and this leads me to a question that kind of comes before even this, like before the transactions on the layer two. If you're imagine, for example, a address on layer one that's sanctioned tries to use like the bridge for layer two, could that lead to, or I mean, as we've seen, like smart contracts can be sanctioned and this kind of stuff. So the kind of bridge contract from layer two itself to the, for example, Aztec, or for example, Starknet, or something that adds a little bit of privacy to the base layer, this could also be sanctioned, and
Yep.
this kind of leads me to a question that came from the community from Joe, and he asked, and also mentioning two of the protocols that we've already mentioned, Uniswap, which I think kind of blocks 250 or something thereabouts addresses from using at least the front end. I don't think they can block them on the contract side, but and also Aztec. And he said protocols like Aztec and Uniswap are signaling to authorities that they want to be compliant by blocking addresses. And how are they vulnerable to a state crackdown? And how is Beam, in a similar sense, how would Beam also be or also not be vulnerable?
Okay. So step by step. So first of all, yes, definitely Uniswap, and like I'm saying Uniswap just because it comes to mind first, but a lot of different protocols made steps to avoid any of these funds getting into their protocols because it's a nightmare, right? So suddenly you become this kind of, I don't know, accessory after the fact or whatever it's called. And now you need to kind of dig out this money out of your pools and, do all kinds of stuff. So like it's better avoid it and not become the next, the next address on the list. But let's talk about like how to do it right. What is the right way to do it, and what Beam has today that, in my opinion, is much better, and what we're still kind of need to improve. So first of all, the ability to run your own node turns out is crazy essential. Like Bitcoin, when I first kind of downloaded and installed the Bitcoin node, yeah, it was annoying. I had to download a lot of information. I had to find the machine with the hard drive that could support it, blah blah blah. But at the end of the day, and it was one day that it took me to do that, I had a Bitcoin node that I could run, and I could access it using like direct. Are we okay? Hello.
I think we're okay. I
Okay.
think I apologize. I accidentally muted everyone.
Everyone.
Yeah,
Yeah, you
sorry about
exercise your centralized authority then.
just making sure we
You see,
understand.
you see how bad centralization is?
I'm exercising my censorship abilities on the Twitter space.
Exactly. Decentralized Twitter. Anyway, so yeah, so the ability to run your own node is essential. Now in Ethereum, it was always a problem. In Beam, helpfully, like luckily right now, it's as simple as basically downloading a desktop wallet. Like you don't even need to download the node kind of directly. You just need to download desktop wallet. It has all of the built-in, fully functional, full node functionality with the graphical interface. So it's very easy and convenient, and it's very important. This is the first part. When you are running your own node, you already have kind of a lot better situation than when you rely on any kind of remote, RPC or whatever services. The second part is the front ends. So in Beam, the desktop wallet runs all of the applications locally. So it means that even if the internet, like the centralized parts, like servers, whatever, go down, like all of your code necessary to running the application is on your machine. And you just need to open your node, and the application is opened within the wallet, and it connects directly to your node, and you don't go through any centralized services.
Yeah.
So this is
And
the second part. Yeah.
like this is I just want to emphasize like how huge a thing this is. And at the time I think many people in the community were kind of wondering like why is there a focus on like the decentralized app store, and what's the need for kind of being able to distribute apps kind of in any manner that you want to. And I think like now it's becoming very, very obvious and very like almost like a required kind of component of a DApp is this front end also being decentralized and also being easily distributed to anyone that wants to use it.
Absolutely. Now I think about all of these people who accidentally like were sent, I don't know, by someone some zero point 0.1 ETH, and suddenly they cannot access DeFi applications and the potential losses it could cause. It's crazy. Like you open your tools which you use to trade every day, and you suddenly cannot access them. We have a question from, yeah, can you,
Brenda.
Oh, yes.
Brenda?
Oh, wonderful. Great. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, great.
Perfectly.
Yes. I'm Brendan Marr. I'm a MIT Media Laboratory alum. I'm also involved in some of the Wyoming legislation around digital identity and privacy. I want to say, first off, just on the prior conversation, yeah, I certainly agree with your architecture there. That's certainly a must. It's very, very, very important regarding nodes that are local and apps and services that are local. But I wanted to throw out, I think, the elephant in the room, which is really around privacy and smart contracts or any contracts. And I've testified about this publicly. One of the great dangers of where we're at is that we will no longer be able to have private contracts, not only between individuals, but also with corporations, between corporations, we will be able to we will be in a position where entities, foreign governments will be able to mine transactions and figure out and determine beforehand corporate structure before the corporation has a chance to implement it. Their competitors will know about loans. Competitors will know about all sorts of things about strategy. And if you can all speak a little bit to this, I'd love to hear your thoughts on these matters. Thank you.
Yeah. First of all, thank you very much for joining, and it's a great question, and we do have an answer, and it's an answer that we've been kind of answering for many years already. In our case, it's called opt-in auditability, and what it means is that you have this layer of privacy, and it's private by default. I'm sorry. Can you mute Brennan,
Oh,
because
sorry.
you have
Yes,
a background noise?
sorry, I'm in a public.
That's fine. It's good. So by default, all of the transactions are private. In Beam, all of the transactions are completely confidential by default. However, there is an ability for a user or a group of users to disclose the information that is either required by somebody they want to comply with, whether it's an authority or a third-party auditor, and they decide which information to disclose. However, we do provide the mechanism to be able to prove mathematically that the disclosed information matches the confidential information on the blockchain. We call this feature an opt-in auditability. We do have now implemented like a part of it, which is called transaction proof. So for example, on confidential blockchain, when you send somebody funds, they can say something like, oh, I didn't receive anything. Can you prove you sent me the money that you told me that you sent? So we do have this mechanism built into each wallet that allows you to prove that you send the funds to this specified address and it was signed by the receiver. Now, these mechanisms are very versatile and very rich in terms of like what you can do with it. You can sign documents during your creation of the transaction. You can exchange information that will be signed by both parties. You can theoretically register the identities of your wallets with some third party without actually affecting your anonymity, but you will be able to provide some of the metadata that you want to a third party in a reliable way. So in my opinion, this is the best direction to go because, first of all, it allows organizations to do their business, conduct their business safely. And by the way, an interesting story, like when we go into Web3 scenarios, like for example, like real world Web3 applications, suddenly there are a lot of needs for privacy. Like, for example, you are a contractor working for some organization, you don't want anyone be able to see your salary, right? So you do need some kind of a privacy, but you do also pay your taxes as a regular person, you provide audits for the authorities or whatever. So yeah, you can achieve that. You can achieve confidentiality by default without having to completely avoid any regulation. You can do both.
That's great. Really wonderful to hear. I think that's completely the right architecture. Thanks.
Yeah, sure. And like, if you want to learn more about that, you're welcome to contact us, and we will gladly provide a more in-depth, explanation. So let's continue with the topic of what's Beam situation. So we have these two things: the ability to run your own node and local applications. By the way, as Gus said, our App Store is not only completely local, but it's also confidential, and it allows you to run applications downloaded from elsewhere. So you can upload the application directly to our contracts through the App Store in completely anonymous way, or you can just create an archive with this application and send it, through whatever Telegram or like any other like email, whatever other means that you want, and you will be able to run it locally. So we did invest a lot of effort in really making this decentralized App Store, decentralized. Now, the third part is how do you connect to other nodes? And this is something that I think we should improve on. Right now, we do have some bootstrap nodes that we use. And this is like the first address. You like when you're downloading a new node, you always need the first other node to connect to. Right now, this portion in our case is centralized. Like we do provide a set of addresses, but all of them obviously are hosted on some well-known cloud provider. And it's something that we should improve on, and we will think about how to do so, whether through some decentralized, I don't know, hash table with nodes. But running public nodes is, I think, one of the most important aspects of the community, so that as many publicly facing nodes we have, that's kind of improves greatly the strengths of the network in terms of being able to find those nodes and connect to them. Guy Koren was saying that for like years, and I think now is the time to really kind of move into this direction. Other than that, the protocols that connect the nodes are encrypted. The protocols that connect the clients to the nodes are encrypted as well. We do have Dandelion, but I think it'd still be beneficial to use a more kind of robust solution like Tor, or even better, Neem. We've been talking about that for a while. We do have some integration options, but maybe we should improve on that as well. It's not possible in Beam to censor users by their addresses because there are no addresses for the users. There are addresses for the smart contracts. They can be changed. Like smart contract can be just relocated quite easily, but still it's possible to censor that, and that depends on the miners. What else did I miss in terms of our strengths and weaknesses? As you know, we are now working on like kind of incubating another project called Source, and it's basically a decentralized Git repository. Like one of the things that Source did is they hosted their binaries on IPFS and put the links to those binaries into the contract. So Beam will definitely do this as well, which means that instead of, as now, you're downloading the binaries from the website, which is centralized, or from GitHub, which is centralized and definitely censoring stuff. So we will put it on also on IPFS and provide the smart contract to download these binaries, which means that you will be able to open a local application, right? So you basically need to some way to connect to the contract, get these addresses and download it from IPFS, or we can just put static IPFS addresses. That's also a possibility. But getting those binaries should be also, decentralized more than it is right now.
This is good. One of the things that you mentioned about Beam contracts having addresses, and these addresses can be seen, and these can be like sanctioned, I guess, as we've seen with Tornado Cash situation. But one of the questions I have, which I know the answer to, but I just want to make this like kind of, or at least emphasize this. In Beam, a contract could be sanctioned, but would parties that are interacting with the sanctioned contract address, would these be able to be identified and thus kind of sanctioned as well, or associated with the sanctioned address?
No.
Yeah.
Obviously not.
And I think this is like one of the crucial things. Like you can, like in Tornado's case, they've sanctioned the like mixing addresses for the various contracts with Ethereum or wrapped Ethereum, USDC, and these kind of things. But in Beam's case, the contract addresses are there, but anyone kind of interacting with them, they maintain their privacy and have this kind of disconnect between the contract and any interactions that they have with it.
Yes. So obviously, first of all, everything becomes much easier on a completely confidential layer one, as Beam is. And I sometimes feel like we hold this kind of technology and, which makes everything very simple. But on the other hand, not necessarily what, some of the organizations in the world would want. And yeah, you don't know like who is interacting with the contract anyway. And in my opinion, it's very important that this information is not even stored on the blockchain. So no matter when or how, like maybe your address gets compromised, it does not affect anyone who was in interaction with you, or like your other transactions, right? So everything is basically completely like off chain. There is no information that could be potentially retrieved from the past and used against you, which is very important.
Absolutely. And this kind of leads to a question that was brought up a few times, once by Joe and another couple of people. And the question itself was, when will the Beam and Ethereum bridge be launched? And my kind of follow-up question to this is, do you foresee, or how do you think, like, this bridge contract on the Ethereum side would work in terms of like the address on the Ethereum side being public and sanctionable for the assets that are coming from the Ethereum side being in that contract and then launching on the Beam side of things?
Yeah. So first of all, in terms of the time frame, we're talking about upcoming month or two. Like it's basically ready from the coding perspective. All is needed is testing and deployment, and we also have this kind of roadmap that that for the next couple of months to deploy everything in our pipeline, which is quite a lot. So let's just go over everything quickly because we are coming up on the hour and I did want to make all of this announcement. So it's a great kind of time to do that. So first of all, we have Beam Wallet 7.2, which has asset swaps. You remember the asset swaps that we talked about like quite for a long time ago? And it's an ability to exchange different confidential assets within the wallet. So we are now in the testing phase of this feature, and we would like to invite the community to help us. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a party. We're going to deploy this feature on the DAppNet, which is our testing framework. And we will invite everyone to come for a specific hour. We will have a Twitter space. We will create some asset swaps, and we will also try to make it interesting by incentivizing part of it. We will publish the details in the upcoming days. And this is the first kind of feature that we want to test. I hope that the 7.2 wallet will be released about the fork height. It's like the fork wallets are already out there. They're completely compatible. But this specific feature is probably going to take a couple of weeks to test and polish, and then beginning of September, we will roll it out. Obviously, we have bridges coming next, and the bridges are definitely going to be problematic in terms of how these addresses on Ethereum are treated. So first of all, yeah, it's possible to block access to any contract on Ethereum, as we now know. I'm not sure how it's going to work, actually. I know there are a lot of bridges to a lot of different places. I don't think all of them are traceable. Like, for example, even if you bridge to Solana or any other chain, like, yeah, it's theoretically, it's a transparent chain, but you still need a much more difficult mechanism to trace these kind of breached assets, right? You need to understand what happened like on the one side of the breach and then on the other side and map the wallets between different networks. So I'm not sure how far these kind of tracing agencies are in this regard, but we will see. But yeah, it's possible to block this, and I don't know, we'll see what will happen, I guess. At least we can say that we have an NFT marketplace, so we're not just for privacy, also sell NFTs and and bands, and we have. By the way, the bands launch was terrific last week. Very cool. A lot of people got their domains, and some of other people's domains apparently. Anywho, and then we have the DEX after the bridges, and we also have the stable coin somewhere between because it's not us. It depends on our partners when they are going to launch it. And then we have the DAO voting part 2 on the distribution of the funds that are accumulating in the DAO. Yeah, so that's the roadmap for the next 2 months. As you can see, it's pretty intense, and yeah, everything will be out there. The bridges, the decks, it's all coming.
Absolutely. And I really like personally stepping back from my role in Beam, and obviously I have to take it with a grain of salt, but I think that this will really be like some kind of Cambrian explosion for Beam in terms of like the stable coin and the asset swaps and also the AMM decks coming into play. It will be very, very interesting to see like the ecosystem kind of grow from these few applications into many. And this actually, before we wrap up, because I know we're almost at the 1 hour mark, and this kind of leads to a question that comes from Joe again, and his question is Beam ready for independent devs to build on Beam? And if not, when will the tooling be available? This is like a question that's always kind of coming up in our internal calls and in the community and this kind of stuff. And I think that in the last 2 newsletters, at least, or maybe the 2 before that, I published a couple of stuff that was shared from the devs, and this was in terms of the BVM, the Beam Virtual Machine contracts, and them being able to be written in Rust, which I think is huge and kind of opens the doors to many more devs, apart from like those versed in C++, Rust devs also being able to kind of build and construct contracts and applications on Beam. And I want to pass the question on to you now, Alex, to kind of hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah. So, yes, you're absolutely correct. We now have an ability to, like, we started adding wrappers for Rust, so you can now implement our smart contracts in C++ and in Rust. Once again, it's just kind of the examples. So there is a huge difference between some examples that you have here and there and the proper documentation. And the answer to your question is yes, it's possible and very kind of it's very possible to bring developers. However, it's not as simple as writing a Solidity contract for now. First of all, we are working on integrating EVM into Beam, and this is kind of the next major milestone for Beam. After we complete the DeFi ecosystem that we have promised and delivered, the next kind of major upgrade that is coming is the ability to write to run EVM contracts on Beam. But even before that, yeah, we definitely need to improve documentation. However, we do provide all of the support. So if you are a developer and you want, or a developer who wants to write something on Beam, for now, as we don't have a amazing documentation yet, we are working on that, but very slowly, obviously. We will help you in any way we can, including kind of guidance and explanations and examples and whatever. Already today, we have quite a few contracts, most of them that deployed, some of them are in kind of these demo stages that you can use as examples. And we have a lot of building blocks available. For example, the band's contract includes this anonymous vault where you can send funds to the same address, but every time get a different kind of point in your vault, so nobody knows exactly who sent you what, right? This is the key functionality of this bands project. And just kind of to sum this up, I think, there is a will, there is a way, in the terms that, yeah, I hope that these events will bring more awareness to the importance of privacy and proper decentralization, not, this decentralization in name only. Like if you add the letters DE before whatever you're doing, does not make you decentralized. And I hope that in this light, whatever we're doing like in Beam for the last few years will be kind of you know I would say looked at as kind of a good example of how to really make things decentralized. It actually started back in like an atomic swap feature, whoever remembers. And all of the things that we've built through the years up to like the very recent ones, like decentralized App Store, we were trying to be as decentralized as possible and support like true decentralization, true censorship resistance, and true privacy on the best level possible, like through the industry. I think it will pay off, especially now when there is a need for this kind of technology.
Absolutely, and this is like one of the what I consider like the key features of being like for the entirety of their existence and especially going into the future, and that's the atomic swaps and being able to trade cross chain with other ecosystems. For example, Bitcoin, you can trade Beam for Bitcoin via atomic swaps with Litecoin and with Ethereum and this kind of stuff. And this kind of subjugates the need for centralized exchanges and the kind of overhead burden from a regulatory standpoint that comes with being a centralized kind of exchange. Uh,
Yeah,
I'm sure everyone I'm sure everyone on the call, in fact, has had like difficulties with centralized exchange for whatever reasons and this kind of stuff. And the atomic swaps and that Beam has kind of get rid of this kind of necessity for the stuff that's required with the centralized exchanges. And this is almost like undersold by us in the community and in its significance moving forward, I
undersold is our middle name.
think. Yeah.
I want to give like one more example kind of towards the end. Uh, let's say you are an organization, you want to have like confidential kind of ability to transact and do like all kinds of operations, but you don't like really need this entire maybe the blockchain thing, but you do need some this decentralized privacy feature. So for example, it's very easy on Beam to create new types of confidential assets, which are exactly as confidential as Beam itself, which means quite a lot. And then you can use APIs that we have in abundance and well documented for a change. It's the same APIs that the exchanges and the pools are using, and you can connect the wallets to any script system that you like. And you have like quite an interesting and complicated systems that use smart contracts that use like all of this functionality. And we are exploring several partnerships now that will use Beam like in exactly the same way. So you don't even need to be like your application does not need to be like 100% blockchain app or decentralized. You can have centralized components, but still you can delegate all of your privacy features to our ecosystem. This can be used in, I will just give like few examples like licensing deals, when you have like some content, that you want to license and do all of these exchanges. You don't necessarily need to use this token as a kind of financial, you don't need to replace your money with it, but you can do it in a way that provides like, just like a blockchain, proof of origin. You have like consensus, you have all of these things that are important for the transaction to happen. So yeah, there are a lot of interesting uses. We are exploring a lot of them. And if you kind of think of something, you hear about things that I think, you think Beam can be used for, in addition to all of the things we're doing now, you're always welcome to bring them to the community, discuss them. And, we're very open to additional kind of partnerships and interest.
Absolutely, and I think that like already what's coming to fruition with Source and this kind of thing, and you've mentioned that there's stablecoins indexes that are also looking to launch on Beam.
Yeah.
It's very exciting time for Beam in the community, and lots on the cards, and also not just like exciting in a positive sense because of what's coming, uh, exciting because of the kind of activities surrounding the wider crypto space in terms of like the sanctions going on with Tornado Cash and the Ethereum merge and these kind of nuanced kind of activities in the wider crypto space that also, at least in my opinion and I'm sure the team's opinion, kind of propel Beam to the front in terms of a solution that's going to be very like useful for anyone that's looking to maintain a censorship resistant environment, which in my personal opinion is like the crux of what crypto and what blockchain is essentially there for.
Absolutely. I totally agree. I think the Bitcoin is kind of having a great time now, because like not just financially, but in terms of like for a long time it was considered maybe a little bit outdated or doing too few things or whatever. But when it comes to the basics, they have them covered.
Yeah.
So yeah, like let me kind of summarize it this way. While we're thinking about all of these great, and futuristic features, whatever they are, let's never forget kind of the basics, and let's not disconnect from the, things that make all of this work, which is decentralization, don't trust, verify, and run your own nodes, and don't take bullshit from anyone.
Yeah, absolutely. It's easy to get caught up and excited in like the weird and wonderful things that are happening that kind of, in a sense, detract from the real kind of crucial benefits of what's trying to be achieved here.
Absolutely. So let's wrap it up. Thank you very much, everyone, for being here. We're always, open for discussions in Twitter, in the community, on Telegram, or wherever. And yeah, we'll see you next week in the same time and continue our
Absolutely.
discussions.
Next week, same time, and we will publish the topic tomorrow, and it will also be in the weekly newsletter. If you haven't signed up, go and do that now.
All right. Thanks,
Awesome.
guys.
Thank you, Alex, and see you soon.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.